This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Andrew, it is such a pleasure to have you here. I am so excited to be sitting down with you. I think your story is such an interesting one. I can't wait to get into it and share it with our community. So, are you ready to get started?
Of course, thank you for having me. Pretty excited about this. Always fun to do another podcast, especially one that mixes tech and the wedding industry, which is not always what happens. A lot of the times it's not as technical. So this is fun.
Couldn't agree more. So, weather reporting and weddings are usually not in the same sentence. And I think we need to go back to the early days to kind of give the context and the setting around how you got to where you are. I know your journey started in the music industry, but let's go back even further than that and talk to me about how you got into generally the space of weather reporting and how that became something that you have pursued throughout a number of different industries.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate you can see the fact that it's not normal. I'd say that it started I guess, root of this whole thing is out of college. I was super interested in event safety, which is a very weird thing to kind of obsess about or get interested in. But I really like the idea of concerts. I've been doing bar mitzvahs, weddings, school dances, my entire like childhood, I guess I call it, up until college as a DJ and promoter and producer, and then did the same thing throughout college. And in college, I started noticing, obviously things are a little bit more risky, and you've got larger concerts and more people, more evacuations, and it was in the time that like EDM was really just kind of like starting out and flourishing, I'll say. So there was a lot of talk in the industry just about like safety at concerts. So I started with the Event Safety Alliance, which was a group of concert promoters and uh, event producers that really wanted to like make events more safe. And I started going to their conferences and reading all the stuff that they posted on their blog. And it was just like something that I was interested in. So when I started in the concert industry, it was because I had met everyone through the safety side of it. And then that led me to be a promoter for AEG and still kind of focus into that world of safety. And a big part of the safety summit was weather. And then they started doing a weather summit. So now it's kind of like I'm fascinated by weather, I'm fascinated by events, fascinated by all the safety aspects. And there's a conference that's basically just about that. And that was really the kind of catalyst for me to keep on doubling down and focusing on that part of the industry. Uh, so yeah, that's sort of my background of how I got into it. And then Ironic itself and where we ended up pushing this into more of the lines of doing wedding meteorology was simply because there was a pandemic at the time. All the concerts had been canceled, all the festivals were canceled, and the only legal events were weddings. So it made sense to try to pay my rent and my health insurance and bills that I needed to work. And the idea came out to take all of the festival concert meteorologists and then link them with wedding planners. And that's kind of how Ironic was born.
That is so fascinating and such an interesting journey because it's almost like there was a little bit of interest combined with happenstance of being in the right place at the right time and starting in an industry that kind of led you down this path. I want to understand when you started looking down the path of, you know, weather reporting and meteorology, was it something in the beginning that you knew you wanted to build and have that you had this entrepreneurial bug, or were you letting it unfold in front of you and take you wherever it may take you?
I think it was a mixture of both. So my entire life, I wanted to start a company. I was pretty awful at it. There's no doubt in my mind about that. First thing I did was, like when you're younger, you do uh, you're from your like lemonade stand days. But my grandfather was an inventor, and he had a great line that was, "It's really easy to invent something as long as you just look around and see what's not there." And it's a very good line as like an 8-year-old to hear because you spend your entire life just trying to figure out what that means. Like, well, what isn't there? Everything's there. This world is filled with products, it's filled with ideas, services. I can't go do the same thing as someone else. And that sort of like led the drive, I'd say, to want to start something. From there, I started a nonprofit, which was in college. And throughout middle school and high school and into college, I always did charity events for different breast cancer nonprofits that my mother was a part of or connected with. So in college, we started our own and we started hosting same sort of thing, like what's not there, do whatever that is. So for us, it was snowboard events in times of year that there wasn't snow. So we would basically, we were in the East Coast where everyone was a skier or snowboarder. Our college campus was like very big into that. So instead of waiting till the snow fell, which there'd be plenty of, we would go around and get like semi trucks filled with snow from skating rinks and bring it in and heavy machinery and build all of these like rail jams or snowboard events and raise money because it was like the juxtaposition that like there shouldn't be a giant pile of snow. It's still grass is green, but we're doing this event. So that was like the second try. We started our concert touring company. That worked out. We went on the road and did really well until one client never paid an invoice, and then that was over. Um, that's when you know you're like running a really good business when one client can just not pay a bill and it's done. Um, but the best part is that the person that I started that business with, James Avery, he is from Element Design. We work with him on, I'd say, 20% of our current gigs because he has started a power and lighting and AV company that has like blown up and taken over parts of the East Coast and is beyond successful. So it is fun to see how like one client stiffs you on a bill and then 12 years later or so you're still working with the exact same business partner just in a different capacity. Um, but yeah, for me it was really about finding these places that there was a need, but there wasn't a product or a service that felt like it was there. So a part of it when it's starting ironic was, okay, well, we know that we can forecast for weddings. We know that we can forecast for these events. There's a need there. But is there a service there? Not really. Can we build this service? And I think that year one and year two, we were definitely down the road of like, wow, this is going to be tech. This is going to be something that's, this is pre AI, but we're going to build this program out. We're going to make this so it's something that every planner needs to use. And we built out a digital version and it was using historical weather data to let people know where and when to choose your venue. And that was like the first idea. And it did really, really well, except that we realized that it cost more to market it than than we were charging for it. So we learned like the valuable business lesson there. And then we went and we started doing more of the concierge meteorology and actually tracking the events similar to what we do with concerts. And that side of the business really took off. So then it was the first time that I had to think like as a business owner, well, one side of the business is new and revolutionary and super tech, but makes $0 and costs, more than it costs more to run than it does that it will make, even in perfect conditions. And then the other side of the business makes money and it is enough that we can get by and we can kind of keep this thing going and we can pay our bills and have a business. And, the joke I always make is like, as long as employees are paid and health insurance is covered, you have a successful business. It's not about being, 10x to 100x times your every year after year. It's like, make sure everyone's comfortable. So when we got into that phase and now we're at that phase still, we're still growing and it's becoming bigger and bigger. But now we're going back and circling over and re-releasing something similar to our first product, but now with AI. But it's been this part of it, like as a entrepreneur, I think I got sucked into the entrepreneur path. And I think, I have a bookshelf over there that is filled with every entrepreneur book and, how to do it and why startups fail and all these other things. And I realized that I try to say that we're not a startup, but we're just like a mom and pop or we're a small business. And because small businesses grow over time, startups can get funded and then they fail. I feel like that happens a lot. So we really try to like focus on just being a a service for our clients and making sure that we're always there, always answer the phone, and always help them out when they're in need versus kind of going for this like big picture, big return attitude.
I love what you said about what you heard from your grandfather at 8 years old, that he basically distilled it down to find what's not there and go build it. That's literally how I describe to my kids what I do as an entrepreneur, right? You know, how do you distill it down to what a child can understand? And I tell them all the time, find the problem. And that's essentially what your grandfather said in a little bit of a different way, but find a problem and go solve it. Right. And you took that and that is sort of what propelled you down this entrepreneurial path, which is so cool because I think it just is a testament to how impactful telling someone at that age those words and what it could do to propel them down that trajectory. You mentioned that you weren't good at starting a business. What did you mean by that? And how did you define not good?
I will still say to this day, I am just becoming decent at running a business. There's a lot of things that play into that. One is, there's an admin side of the business. There is the organization. Uh, I was describing this was a call I had actually yesterday with my father because we just started working with uh, a new she's basically taking over the admin role and building a department out for us. And I've spent the last 4 months going through and redoing our SOPs and what our processes look like and how to onboard new clients. And I was like, it's great that, next week we're going to go through and just redo our entire like Google Cloud. Had to explain to my dad what that was. And then I was like, imagine that I take a note and I just put it in the drawer. She's taking a note, she's putting it in a file and then putting it into a drawer. And like that file's always going to be right there. And I can just go get that. But for me, for years, I've just written the note down and just shoved it into the drawer. And he was just like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. He's like, you are not that person. So I think that a lot of the parts of the business for me that I'm not the right person for the job. And I think that's a lot of the admin stuff. And there's plenty of people who will listen to this who have worked with me in other roles that are like, yeah, that's not his gig. My gig is what I feel most comfortable doing is coming up with new creative ideas, ways to represent data, the information, things that our clients are going to want to hear. But I feel like a lot of the day to day business struggles, I took advice from people that I shouldn't have, and I said, "Oh, well, that person knows what they're doing. So I'm going to go run down the road and I'm going to go try to get venture funding." And then it's like a 6-month process of going to get venture funding and then finding out like we're not really that company, but everyone told me that that's what I should be doing or that's the next step. So it's like I didn't know what I didn't know. And I listened to those around me who were obviously trying to help, but they didn't understand the vision that I have for the company. And I think now I'm at the point where it's like, I know the clients I love to work with. I know the amount of work that we can do in a year. I know how to bring on people who understand what our goals are and what we're doing and what we want to do. Um, and then I also know that like there are things that I should not touch. Like I need to have someone that's making sure that the admin side of our business is organized, clear, and perfectly laid out. And I need to then take myself out of it. And I actually did this the other day where we had a new client who booked an event, and I went to go do what I normally do, which is like I open our back end, I put the information in, and I like stopped myself. I opened up the SOP and I followed it word for word. And it went from being like a 15-minute process normally to like 5 minutes. And I was just like, oh, well, that's done. And then it was over and it was like finished. But I've always just been sort of someone that is, a little less organized, a little bit more creative. Definitely, not the type A, but also still somehow weirdly a type A. I don't know how to describe it.
I think there's a lot of pressure when you're either considering going out on your own or you just are going out on your own to feel like you need to do it all. And I think the fact that you are self-aware to know where your strengths are and maybe where your weaknesses are is what probably got you to this point and is part of what made you successful because you knew where to offload and, outsource certain areas that maybe weren't your greatest strengths. And that in turn made you probably more efficient and more effective as a business owner. And I think that may be a, you know,
pitfall potentially when an early entrepreneur, somebody considering going in, either is looking down the path of having to do it all or feels like they need to do it all, and it doesn't translate to success because there's no one that has strengths across everything on the board. What advice would you give to people who may think that they're not good at this and want
Y-
to get to a place where they want to own a business?
I'd say there's so much to unfold into all of that, but I think the biggest thing that I was thinking about while you're saying all this is like you do need to screw up. You do need to like get burned a couple times. You need to see how it works. A prime example would be like anything digital. I've never studied design. I've never had to make files. I've never had to like, digital files that go and are sent around. Posting on social media. Like if I go through my pitch decks and what my sales decks looked like, they're all still the same information. They look so different. There is ways that I've heard people will write back. A client once told me, like, I use the word starting at, and I put a starting at price was $4,500. And the reason I put that was because if it's an international event, it's $5,500. And she questioned, well, you sent me a bill for 55 because the event was in Italy, but I just got your document and now it says 45. My client's going to question why you charged me an extra $1,000. And I was like, oh, that in my mind, no reason. Just the fact that it is international, so we have to pay extra for labor, so that's why it is there. But I didn't mean it to be a confusing moment. But the second that she called that out, I went to our website, went to everything and changed it and just listed domestic, international. And you need that moment. You need that client that like you've wanted to work with them for years to call you out and be like, "Hey, there's an issue right here. This is what I noticed." You also need to like save 500 versions of the same thing that you've tried to Photoshop on your computer. You need to know what you want your brand to look like because you've screwed up so many times. Um, Making great creative briefs and then sending them out to a designer is like a very easy way to get what you need done. But if you don't know how to make the creative brief, you are going to spend 3 or 4 times more money on that designer because they're going to keep on coming back to you and saying like, what exactly is the scope of work? How has this changed? Um, but the truth is, I think for anyone that wants to start a business, like it's kind of and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but it's just kind of like fuck it, go for it, try it, and you will fuck up. There's no doubt about it. There's never been a person that has started a business and like everything went right every single time. But it's also about like when you have those moments, you have to kind of learn from them. And everyone says that. And the other part of it is you will hate what you're doing and get burnt out and be depressed by it. Or maybe for me, this is just my chemical, compounds and mixes up here. Um, it's a lonely, rough job, and you need to truly believe that there's no other choice for what you could be doing in life. And once you get to that point, you kind of just, jump off the deep end and say, "This is it. We're going for it." And however long it takes, you're gonna ride it out. But there's definitely been days that I look at this and, in the early days, it's like it would make a lot more sense to get paid a lot of money to go produce events for someone else where there's no personal connection. And, you think you just got to keep on pushing through it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that is exactly my experience and how I would share and define my first few years of being in this entrepreneurial journey. And you do go down through the low points, and in those moments, the only thing that pulls you out is the belief that there is nothing else out there that you'd want to do, because otherwise, it's so easy to choose that alternative path if you think there's something greener on the other side. But if you believe that this is the only path for you and that you're going to get there, it pulls you out of those moments and you eventually get back on the high. But to get to the high, you have to go through the lows. How did you validate the early days of pivoting into the wedding industry? And I don't even know if I'd call it a pivot because you really just were kind of exploring a new trajectory, but how did you validate that in the wedding industry, that this was something, that there was something there, that you were sitting on an idea that was truly going to turn into a business?
Well, there's two parts of that. There's validating that to your old life, and then you're validating it to your new life. To my old life, the best line I ever heard was I got very excited about figuring out at what like dew point, uh, and how much humidity, like the structural integrity of the cake, a wedding cake would be, with fondant versus buttercream. And a friend called me, who is works and has worked for years with Paul McCartney's tour. And he called and was just like, "Hey, what's going on? Are you gonna get ready to go back on the road?" And like, I'm going out in this tour, and like, there's so much work. Everyone is getting hired right now in 2021. Like the world is back on, or 22. And I like went off on like a pure ADHD tangent about fondant and buttercream. And he, excuse me, he stopped me mid sentence and was just like, "Dude, what the fuck are you talking about?" And it was like, I was like, "Well, because like you don't want the cake to fall over in the heat." And he was like, "This is literally all you're talking about right now. It's like you should like touring's about to start back up. Like get ready, we're going on tour." And I was just like, "No, no, that life is past. Like that was the old life. Like we're back into this. This is what we're focusing on now." So you have to like break up with your old self in life, which is a very weird part, and validate that to there's this is maybe just my experience, and I hope this helps for someone who hears this. Uh, Everyone around you, even if it's your closest friend or your parents, are going to think you're batshit crazy for starting something new, until it's successful. And then everyone around you is going to say they were your biggest cheerleader from day one. And it's human nature. Don't think about it for more than 5 minutes. Like, just let it, when it happens, if someone tells you you have a bad idea, just roll your eyes internally, not actually to them, and you'll still do it. Um, and then to answer your question about how to validate ironic and the concept of meteorology to the wedding industry, that was, it was and is still going on. I think that first I needed to embrace the fact that I didn't know the industry like others did, um, which was very helpful because it was like I didn't know who the key players were. I just went to a bunch of events and found the personalities that I matched with the best and went up to them. And it turns out the planners who were super into climate change and very much into environmentalism and very much New Yorkers, East Coast people that like got sarcasm and I could have conversations with. They were the ones that first listened to what we were doing because I was able to just have regular conversations with them. Then once those people started using it and it really helped them and saved them money, and we were able to figure out ways to, not have to have a tent on backup because the weather is going to be okay, and reduce the amount of labor that was going to go into said tent. And now they could shift that money off the budget and push it towards something else. They started really telling everyone about us. And then it became a sort of word of mouth. But it also taught me like there are people that don't use our service because they believe they're untouchable. They believe that things always work out for them. They might not believe in climate change as much as others. They stick with a feeling like no one has the weather today that they had when they were a child. Like that's just not scientifically possible anymore to have the exact same weather that you had every summer when you were growing up. And there are people that still stick with that gut feeling. So we definitely found that like our people are the ones that we want to work with, and we might not be for everyone. And that sort of validation really helped push me in the right direction and continue to sort of go after those types of clients.
That is so important because you saved yourself the time from chasing the wrong
I,
customer
I def
profile.
I definitely chased them for a minute and then realized the conversations were just awkward. Like now I sum it up with like I had a new client call this morning and I didn't ask the question which I always try to ask, or I make a joke about somehow, which is like something like, and well, you believe in climate change. And if they don't respond with a yes, we're gonna cut that, and I this is what kills me is that I've turned cellular data off on my phone and someone still, how is this possible? Um, so I'll start with, it's actually funny because like this morning I had a conversation with a planner who is new, just reached out to us through our website. And normally I start the conversation by saying like something like something. And yeah, you believe in climate change. And then I try to gauge them very quickly on their response. And if they say, anything that is counterintuitive to climate change is not happening and real, then it's like, cool. Well, this is our services. This is what we offer. Happy to work with you. Let us know. And then I'll sort of exit to the side stage. But once I can catch their vibe, and this planner lives in London, does a lot of stuff in San Francisco, does stuff in New York, and was describing basically how the weather has changed so much in San Francisco over the last couple of years and how they're now not in a drought. And I was like, okay, cool. My people, like, you are going to get this 100%. This is perfect person to connect with. So I still, every day is a different day. Still have to work off conspiracy theories on a regular basis. But for the most part, and I say this, the people who don't want to work with us probably don't follow us. The people that don't believe in climate change probably don't want to, look at me like I'm just standing on a soapbox talking about, all the things that they don't believe in. And our stance is also very different, or mine personally, and I say it's our company stance, which is, I think we're past the point of return when it comes to climate change. So now it's about infrastructure change. So if it's infrastructure change, that to me looks like if you're planning an event and you know that there's a higher risk of rain, the infrastructure change is that you're going to bring in a tent. On a larger scale, New York should consider investing in pump systems for the subway, because every year there's a likely chance they'll see more than 2 inches of rain, and that floods the subway. So you just have to change and kind of pivot and roll with what is there and what's happening.
How did you build credibility and trust in an industry where that is so important? And it's a small industry, it's a tight-knit industry. Everybody knows everybody, planners, vendors, and you are working within the top, 1-2% of industry leaders, and those are your partners. How did you crack that nut? How did you build the trust and relationships and credibility that you needed coming from a completely different background?
I'd say that I can't take any credit for that. The credit I'll take is I didn't fuck up. That's like the part. That's what I did. The rest of the industry saw me not fucking up on those planners events, and that's what gave us the credibility. So Brian Raffinelli is our first client for Concierge, and the way that it worked with him was that he has friends in the Boston community that I know, and I went up to him at an Engage and basically said, "Hey, Andrew and Andrew from South Boston. They mentioned that I should come talk to you at this event," and we caught up with them. I caught up with them before, talked to him at the event, and he said, like, "I have 6 events this month. If you can do them, this sounds great. Let's just try it out." So Brian gave us a shot, and we just didn't fuck up. There was still a lot of like learning in that, because we've now gotten to the point where I know what his risk thresholds are, and I know how to anticipate what he's worried about, and I know what things that it's like I know the difference between, for him, what a drizzle is versus light rain, versus the difference between those two could be very different for someone else. So we spend time together working with them, but they were the ones that really, they being Raffinelli, really kind of gave us the shot to prove ourselves. And then once we proved ourselves with them, I feel like that was where other planners in that sort of you know level or world really started giving us more chances. Then from there, it was everyone else kind of was like, "Oh, you're using Andrew. Oh, we just did this." And that's really where it's, that still freaks me out. That, like, there's no doubt about that, is when I get a text from someone who says they were like, it was a referral from another planner, and like, it feels like the middle schooler with like pure anxiety in me is just like, what were they saying? Like, what was good? Like, it obviously was not bad, because they wouldn't have called. But knowing that someone is like talking about you outside of what you're presenting still creates enough anxiety to keep me up at night. Um, but yeah, it was really just, we did the job, we did it well, and acted professional throughout the entire thing, but then also learned to not act professional with clients that you build a relationship with. Um, I There's a planner who I've worked closely with for years, who, like, I gave her a call one day, and I know her style, but she had 4 feet of snow coming, and I've talked about this event a lot. Um, and it was 4 feet of snow was going to drop right before her wedding out in Tahoe. And like I could have written a very long worded explanation about what was going to happen and sent her a very drafted, polished email, but called her up and was just like, yeah, you guys are going to get fucked. Like, this is unbelievable what's about to happen. Like, this is a horrible storm. Like, we got to get this figured out right now. And she was like, okay, cool. He called me. He showed me urgency. Let's cross-load the vans so that we can get all the equipment up the hill, which is going to be covered in snow. Let's get extra heaters for inside the tent because the tent has the structure has a plexi roof. And if the snow doesn't melt, it could collapse. Like, she just jumped right into it. And that's the type of person that we just get along with very well. Um, so it's that difference of like knowing how to kind of play the right role at the right time. And then we still have calls that we jump on with clients, couples, and when we're on with them, it's a very different conversation because it's obviously we're presentable and we are front of house all of a sudden. So it's like you have to play into all the different roles and positions that you find yourself in.
How did you have the confidence to walk up to that first paying client in what is a room filled with industry leaders? How did you have the confidence to walk up and just ask for the opportunity? Because I also have done that, but I know what fear also comes with that, because sometimes you're doing that before you're ready, before the product is ready, before you know that you can deliver, but you're promising that you're going to deliver and you're just going to figure it out while you're doing it. And that takes a lot of confidence and the ability to put the fear aside, right? How did you get there?
You say confidence. I would say stupidity. I I knew who Brian was because of Google searches and reaching out to friends and seeing the best planner list for Boston. I knew who you know all these planners were because I had done my research going in. Um, but I didn't spend 10 years, I think, idolizing them and putting them into a version of my mind uh, that they were not approachable because I just didn't know better. And they are all approachable. So like that, not, but I hadn't psyched myself out yet. Um, but interestingly enough, I was at Engage oh, last December. And there was a planner who was speaking on stage who I have shot emails to and tried to reach out to and never really connected with them. And there was a point where someone offered to introduce me to them, and I felt like the butterflies in my stomach because I was like, oh, now because I've had 5 years to build up the persona of this person. They were great. It was like the easiest conversation I've ever had. But walking up there, like I had the time for that to settle in. Um, I think that there's a point where you you just kind of have to go for it, and it's different than I think that a lot of people. I'm lucky enough that my previous life I was on a tour bus for 9 months a year with people who were seen as celebrities. So if you had someone like and I'll use like Little Yachty as a prime example, where every single day we'd have thousands of kids who would show up and freak out if they met Little Yachty. Versus to me, that was like Miles, the kid who I had to go wake up on his like tour bus bunk because he was asleep. And we had a show. It's like they're people, but there's an outside work performance or persona. And that's what they put on. But like, they're still people. And like, if you can talk to one person, you should be able to talk to every person. Um, but yeah, just don't wait. I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest advice I give is don't wait to meet what you think are your heroes in the industry, because you will build a persona for them in your head about who you think they are or how they act. And the truth is, you're probably wrong. And if you just walk up and introduce yourself and you know that you can deliver, I knew I could deliver on these events for Brian because I had just done 300 events a year with meteorologists on concerts. And I knew that if it's going to work for the concerts, it's going to work for the weddings. Like it was just, that was the easiest part. The hardest part is I ran from meeting him to my hotel room and emailed my lawyer and was just like, hey, we don't have a contract for new clients like this. And he's like, no, I'll just give me a couple hours and I'll put one together. And then was like, cool. how do I sign? Okay, I might need like DocuSign and then like sign that up. So it's like that's the type of thing that you have to be a little bit more prepared for. It will save you a lot of the effort.
That's amazing, and I couldn't agree more. There's so many logistical things you just don't think about or realize until you're, like, in the situation where the opportunity presents itself and you've gotta go. How did you get into that room? How did you get into the right rooms?
Oh, I think that part is credit card debt. Yeah, hate to say it. The world is it's not pay to play in the sense that you're paying to actually go do it. It's pay to play that you have to go buy a black linen tuxedo, have your neighbor who at the time in Brooklyn was like an 80-year-old lady, who like was a tailor or seamstress for Christian Dior, like take my tux and like fit me on the street because she was so scared about COVID. I couldn't go into her house. So like we were outside on the street, like doing my tuxedo. And like I then like also like learned how to tie a bow tie, gave up on that, did a pre-tied one. Like that was so foreign to me having to put myself in that room of being around all those people. But the truth is like the option was there. It was just that I had to pay the fee to come down to New Orleans at the time. I was living in New York, to go put myself in the room. Like the pay to play to put yourself into the room. Um, and the yeah, like everything about that. I got lucky. I was supposed to it was, we had no money. I had like a credit card limit of probably like $10,000 on the company credit card at that point. The ticket was I think 6,500 or something like that, somewhere in that range. I planned on staying on a friend's couch, was able to get one of our like advisors let me borrow his like apartment. Even that, in hindsight, I wish I stayed in the same hotel as everyone because I learned now that there's so many conversations that happen at the hotel bar, and I thought it was like a regular conference. Um, you know, if you find yourself at a wedding conference and it runs like it's a dentist conference, you're at the wrong wedding conference. That's the best way of saying it. Like, be in the ones where there's ABBA and champagne and dancing and partying and late night someone's ordering 20 pizzas to a hotel room, and like find yourself in that room because that's where real friendships are born. And those are the moments that you'll exponentially grow your business. And the best thing is that while you're in those rooms, you don't need to talk about work once. You just need to be there and become friends with people. And soon enough, you become very, very close to these people and they become your really, really good friends. And like, that's the best part about this industry. But yeah, if you find yourself at a wedding conference where you're getting like a printed out name tag and you're in conference hall B, you might be in the wrong place.
That is such good advice because it truly emphasizes the difference between building relationships that then convert to opportunities versus just selling and being salesy and trying to just sell a product without cultivating the relationships first. And I think if you cultivate those relationships first, it's going to really pay off in the long run.
It's so true. And the weirdest thing that like I'm having all these kind of flashbacks where I'm like, man, shit, I should write this stuff down sometime. But it's don't pitch yourself ever. And like I I know that I've got like 5 to 10 people in the wedding industry that will be at a handful of events throughout the year. And if someone doesn't know me and that person is near me and someone asks what I do, it's normally because they've introduced like, "Oh, and this is Andrew. He does concierge meteorology." Their reaction is like, "Oh, what is that?" And then before I can even get a chance to say it, that person is like describing the entire thing. Moses Lynn, he's a guitar player out of Southern California, incredible acoustic guitar player who does rowing guitar. He can pitch ironic better than I can pitch ironic, like hands down. And I've heard him do it so many times that like my confidence levels through the roof because like even if I stumble on something, I know that he's just going to stand next to me and say the thing that I should have said because he spends his entire business is walking around wedding events, playing guitar, putting himself out there, being that confident. And like he can just do it better than I could ever do it. And he's introduced me to so many people or introduced the concept to so many people. Well, I just kind of like stand there awkwardly. So like you really have to find the people that, you know, understand your value and what you're doing it. And even like what I just pitched for his company or the way I described his is like it's a lot more than just Roman guitar. But like I like there are just some people that can sell your service so much better, and people want to hear from someone else. They don't want to hear from the person who's actually like supposed to be selling it.
You've got
Um,
to find your advocates. That's the way to do it. And your advocates will just sing your praises, and that converts to so much more opportunity than you could ever do without that. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Now that I have you here, I have to get your take on Etsy witches. People are turning to Etsy witches for weather predictions for their wedding. This is a trend that I have seen on TikTok, on Instagram. Some of the biggest names are doing it. What is your take? And are these Etsy witches real? And why? Why is this even happening?
the why I will not be able to answer. That one, that is beyond me. I will say, we're now in the Etsy witch game, but we don't call it Etsy witches. We just launched, or we'll be launching. I'm not sure when this will be released, but March 1st we'll be launching and starting to ship what we're calling Blessings from New Orleans, which is, we're then saying, an ironic twist on the mystic and the scientific. And we launched this because I was fascinated as well. So I went online and I looked to see, all the articles, read all the articles, then was like, fuck it, I'm going to go pretend to have a wedding and go buy an Etsy witch spell. And the spell I got was like a PDF from 1995. And it looked like it was made with like, I don't remember if, or no, if anyone remembers like Clippy, who was like the little like, yeah, like you remember. For those who
I
don't
know
know,
Clippy, dating myself, but I know Clippy.
yeah, like maybe we'll drop like a Clippy JPEG or like a GIF in there. Clippy mixed with like early PowerPoint art, and I paid $12. I basically gave my name, um, my credit card info, and then the date that I was supposed to be having my wedding. And when I booked it, or when I got this, I got like an email back, and it was just like this 30-page PDF that had nothing to do with anything and was just rambling about all these mystic things. And I live in a very scientific world with a lot. I'm like woo adjacent. That's how I'm gonna say that. I yeah, I'm woo adjacent. Like like I'll go to like my friend's summer solstice party, and I will also go to my breathwork classes and my yoga and my meditation. Uh, but I'm like still living a lot in science. But when this came to be, so I was like, man, this is fake. Like this isn't real. And in the wedding industry, like you never want to see charlatans. Like you never want to see charlatans in any industry. And it felt like this was just someone had basically ChatGPT'd what to put on an Etsy landing page, then not even setting up a ChatGPT bot to like personalize it. Some have, I assume, but they just like were just collecting the $12. And then I realized like there's hundreds and hundreds of reviews, which means that people have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on this. So I reached out to in my woo adjacent world. I have a friend who is a mystic practitioner here in New Orleans who specializes in voodoo. So I reached out to Alexandra and I basically said, "Hey, if I start bringing clients to you, would you have the bandwidth to like do voodoo for their weddings? Because it seems like it's a thing." And she was like, "Yeah, but I'd like to do more than that. Like, what? I don't want to just do a blessing because that's not enough to actually connect." And I'm sitting there being like, "Okay, what is enough to connect?" There is a moment that I've described before with like, you have your voice here, and then you have your voice here. This voice is like, man, I fucking hope she doesn't think I'm making a joke out of this, and I don't believe in voodoo because I really don't want her to put a bad like voodoo curse on me. As I'm saying that, I'm also in this voice here being like, well, if you're worried about a voodoo curse on you, you must believe in voodoo because if you're scared of something, you have to believe in it. So I'm like having this conversation, and the second I have this in the back of my head, I like feel this moment of zen, and I'm just like, okay, I do believe in this. I don't know if it's like the guiding factor for most of my decisions, but like there's enough that this is happening back here. So I had this moment with her where I was like, yeah, like what would you do if you could do this right? If this was someone came into your shop, how would you want this to be built out? And she said, give me some time, let me think on this, how it be. And I said, well, the only thing I want to make sure that is included with this is I don't want to do anything that involves the actual voodoo or the practitioner of this, the practice of this. I just know that when the client really receives what they're going to receive, it needs to not be clippy. It needs to not be this like 30-page document. So then I reached out to Matthew with A Fine Press and said, hey, we're working with a voodoo practitioner to offer basically weather spells or like a blessing for this event. Can you connect with her and can you come up with whatever the end result is, the deliverable? But it needs to be something that is physical and of the quality that you'd see stationary at a ultra luxury wedding. And he was like, this is weird enough that I'm 100% will do this. So he literally flew in from Florida. We all got together. We spent an afternoon walking around the French Quarter where Matt and I learned about voodoo and the practice and the history and the mix between Catholicism and Judaism and Christianity. And um, I'd say like the parts of the New Orleans culture that has basically brought all of these people here and how this all came to be. And then since then, I've done what I think I should be doing, which is like I stepped the fuck back and I have let them just like cook. And they have a whole process now where she goes out and first I gather the information, but instead of like just name and credit card, it's name, credit card, address. We're joking on the credit card and address, but like it's name, couple's name, birthdays, photo of the couple, like all the things that their fears, their worries, all this information, where the wedding is, why they chose that location. And then she is putting together this process where she goes out and she lights a candle. And it's not like she lights it at like 3 p.m. when she has time. The first one that she did, I was like, oh yeah, I'll swing by and pick up the blessing box tonight. And she's like, oh no, I'm not lighting it until 2:37 a.m. because that's when the like astrological time too late for them is. So I'm like, cool, I'll see you at 9 a.m. Like I'll grab it in the morning. And she does this whole process. And then from there, one of the big pieces that was missing is that voodoo is something that for her, with all of her clients, that they take home and they bring into their life. So she's created and presses handmade incense that are then put into this box. And then she's written, which I can't really talk about what's inside, but she's created basically a blessing path, or at least like instructions on how you and your partner can welcome the blessing into your lives. And there's some steps and some instructions to follow. But like she's just brought this to life. And then Matthew has turned this into something physical. And I'm sitting here now being like, what the fuck is going on? Because like it seems so cool to just bring two artists together to make something. And this is not what I normally am doing on an everyday with Ironic. So the long answer, very long answer to the question, what is the deal with what Etsy witches? I do not believe I know why people want to have them, other than it could be that it's a trend and a lot of people are doing it for that reason. But I believe fully that there's a faith or a belief that something, and it could just be as simple as the wedding planning process is so stressful, that this creates a peace of mind and it gives you enough information to kind of help you with that process. So that could be why, because those weddings are stressful for every and all parties involved. So this could be a good outlet for that. That being said, I have seen the forecast change dramatically since she's done one of the blessings at a wedding, and that freaked me the fuck out. So I like, yeah, we had one where my team was like tracking thunder and lightning until midnight the night before. She did the blessing at 2:37. I woke up the next day and it was stunning and like perfect outside. And then I called them and they were like, yeah, the storm just like completely pushed to the north. And I was like, I hate, like, I love it, I hate it, I don't know, I got goosebumps, it's a whole thing.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, so there's something to this whole voodoo blessings and using some sort of channel to redirect the weather, whether it be an Etsy witch or this. But I think what is really cool is you saw a trend and you up leveled it, and you are now offering a more
up-leveled version of what people were already interested in doing and getting. And I think that is so interesting because you really moved fast on it. And that is just, again, another quality I think in a lot of people who want to start a business or who are running a business that they need to have, because these things evolve quickly, especially with social media. These trends happen quickly, they change quickly. And if you're not jumping on them, you're going to miss them.
Yeah. I think that like if we miss out on this trend and next month Etsy witches are it's taboo. We don't talk about them anymore. It's like, okay, well, we gave it a shot. We had fun. We had a blast in the like creation of this and the investment 100% worth it 10 times over because it's been fun. But, there's when you talk about up leveling, I think there's a level th- whatever you do, and this is a message for those out here who are trying to start something, do it to the level that you want to see it at. And, it's for me, I love hospitality. I think that I will most likely in life always choose the situation where I know that I'm going to experience the best hospitality over the situation that might be faster, easier, but it's like more of like there's no personal connection to it. Um, I, small banks, knowing your local coffee shop, understanding who these people are behind the counter. Recently had I was at the airport and I asked if they had a shirt in my size. They said no, and I needed the shirt to go to a football game for Tulane. Uh, that was that weekend. They said no, but they were like, "Oh, but I can run to the store and I can pick one up for you." And that one person that when I flew back to the airport said, "Oh no, it's not in stock yet." And I was like, "Oh, no worries." She's like, "But I can still get it for you." And like this act of simple like hospitality, she would do this. I ended up not being back in stock for another 6 months, and I finally was she texted me out of the blue and said, like, "Hey, your shirt finally came in." And I was like, "Oh, perfect. I have a flight next week. Can you hold on to this for me?" And I went back and grabbed that shirt and then called and asked for the owner of the company to basically explain that, like, this woman has spent the better half of 6 months trying to make sure one customer got one shirt for a football game that was 6 months ago. Like, that's the level that you should always bring to whatever you're doing. What really is hard to see, and I think that in the wedding industry, you'll see this in every other industry, is when there's a thing like Etsy witches or a trend or fashion, all of a sudden there's just people that come out of the woodwork and create very quick gimmicky product lines. So, and there's companies that print on t-shirts just for that occasion, like till there's a catchphrase and then everyone can do it until no one's buying that shirt anymore. I think with like AI is a prime example where you're doing something that's very different than the way that people use AI, which is you're creating your own product line. Your product line is being coded and fed, and the prompts are being generated by those who are knowledgeable about the information. And then in doing that, you're creating a luxury or a product line that has that sort of feel of care and being taken care of versus someone else might just say, okay, well, I know that there's a website that does visuals. I'm just going to go type in, I want this, 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 and this, and it's going to make a great visual. It's not going to be functional. It's not going to be like anything that could be created without, you know, denying the laws of physics. Um, and someone's just going to say, oh, well, I want to present this to a designer now and say, make this. I built this. This is my idea. But, it doesn't take into the room. It doesn't take into what the carpets are already in the room. It doesn't think about where the support beams are for the building. It doesn't think about where the windows and the natural light comes from. And it's like your version of doing this is by first building something that is core and structurally there, and then adding on these components to it. And that's hospitality. Like that's the whole reason that we can get into this.
Love that. And I think what you're also saying is what kept you going, even if you were hopping on a trend or doing something a little bit off the beaten path of what you were normally building, it still was rooted in the core and the core purpose that you have for, even starting on this journey. And anything that you do, whether it's adjacent to the core, it still ties back to your why. And For me, wedding and events is my why. And the reason being is because I love bringing people together. I love celebrating a moment with your closest friends and your closest family. And, having gone through my own wedding and having put on so many different events outside of that, has always been my why. And so anything I do, whether it's building, the product that I'm building now and building Gia or something adjacent to that, it goes back to my why and my purpose. And that's kind of what you're describing as well, right? Like never lose sight of that and never forget why you're doing this in the first place.
100%. And it's funny when you think about like what your why is. Um, for me, my why, or at least like the reason that I'm in the event industry, is because when I was 13, I started DJing bar mitzvahs, and I fell in love with the events. I fell in love with the people on site, and I just like the whole thing from loading to load out to a weekend, like stay busy. It was just great. Like every part of it was amazing. I then got super jaded and I was like, man, I want to go do concerts. And I left that world and went out with a DJ and started doing concerts as a roadie. And it was the exact same thing, but it was like a bigger scale. It was more, intricate. And I did that for years. And then I got burnt out and I went to an event company as like for big brands like Budweiser and Hilton and Delta to do their corporate events. And it was still that like, I love the events. I love the people. This for the first time in my life is not that, where ironic does not have, I'm not on site. Um, and that burnt me out so much early on because I wasn't on site. So I felt like I was missing out in the early days of being like this connection and, being part of the team and that feeling of like, yeah, you did a good job, thumbs up. And then when I started doing the concierge side and really becoming part of the team, being on the text message threads, having people just give you like a simple thumbs up emoji to like calling you after and saying, thank you, man, that saved us. This was great. I started feeling that again. And that wasn't until, 3 years ago. So 2 years in, but for 2 years, I missed out on my why. And I think for me, it was like creating a digital product gave me a lot of drive because it looked like it was going to be something that was very profitable, but it did not fill up any of the emotional cup. Like it was not there. So now I can go into this and feel like, okay, well, I'm very much filled like with joy and happiness about being part of the team and connecting with all people. Now I want to go back and do a digital product because we're at a price point that if we don't go digital for some of our services, people can't use us who want to use us because their clients might not be coming to the wedding with a same sort of level of budget. But like they shouldn't get cut out or not be able to make smart decisions because of that. Um, and then this is, without being political, this drive for that has happened a lot this year with the defunding of a lot of resources that were previously there. There has been plenty of times over the last before this current administration, where I would get a call from someone that was like, we're having this wedding. The budget's, $25,000. It's going to be in our backyard. I saw your ad on site. I didn't see anything about prices. And I'd be like, hey, appreciate you calling. Just so you know, our budget is this. But these are the 5 resources that are available from the National Weather Service, from NOAA, that if you track these and you track them this way and you check at these hours, you will have enough information to be able to do what you need to do. And don't use your weather app, just use this discussion and look for these keywords and see if those words pop up, then you're going to be in a good situation. But those reports aren't being produced anymore on that level. And a lot of the resources that many people were using are not there. So it started out with hurricane warnings. I started doing email list, and now we're actually moving it to a text message based list where we're going to be texting wedding professionals that live in different parts of hurricane prone locations to let them know before hurricane season, this is when it's time to evacuate. This is when it's time to hit the road. This is what you need to do. This is not a drill type of things. And it's because we have access to $1 billion network of meteorologists that we pay into as part of our operating costs. But in doing that, I get this information. I can do with it as I want. And I'd rather give it to the people that I want to be safe than just not do anything with it at all because they don't have the resources that, you know, they could have had last year but are not there this year. So it's, we're kind of still going through these like changes in keeping up with the idea of like, do good business, help people, make sure your friends are safe, don't screw anyone over, don't be a charlatan, like all these big core principles that I feel like a lot of people miss or forget about. So
I
that,
think it's so interesting what you shared because, firstly, there's so much to unpack there. But firstly, there is an evolution that you go through when you're starting to build a product, and you're not always on the money the first time, and you have to be open to going through that iteration and that evolution. Like for your case, you went from tech to more of a concierge service that is like human in the loop, back to tech with human in the loop now, right? And I think that is an evolution that is not isolated to your experience. So many entrepreneurs have to go through that, and you have to have the resilience and the patience and the grit and the willingness to go through that in order to get to a place that feels more aligned. And the fact that you were more burnt out when you were doing just the tech is because you were misaligned from your why, because you couldn't experience, being on site. And when you're misaligned, burnout happens so much faster. But talk me through, and I know we're almost at time, but talk me through how you went from tech to non-tech to back to tech really quickly, because it's also something that's a little counterintuitive now in the age of AI. People are like immediately jumping to tech. And there is now more of a discussion around how the paying, the price of human is now a premium because so much is being automated. And you found that when you were automating too much, it actually was not working. You had to bring the human back in. So how do you think about that? And what would the advice be for entrepreneurs who are jumping straight into building tech be?
yeah, I would say, well, the biggest thing is that we're not touching anything in our concierge business uh, that and converting that to tech. Um, there is 1,000 companies out there right now that are all claiming that they have the best AI weather service in the world. I would put any of those AIs up against a 65-year-old meteorologist with years of experience and like a chip on his shoulder because the weather's bad that day and he's been up for 20 hours tracking it. Um, there's a human level of meteorologists that is like, you can't compete with just life experiences. You can get better data, but you can't compete with the interpretations with AI. And a lot of people are trying to do it, but they're trying to do it for mass casualty events. They're trying to do it for, is it going to rain in an entire region? But they're not thinking about which way is the wind coming in, at what hour, which sidewalls can we lift up or can we remove? How will that change the design? And then is that going to mess over? Are there candles on the table? And are those going to get blown out? AI is not going to think about all of those things, even if you ask it to sometimes, because it's just a lot of intuition about being on site and intuition about how events work, mixed with years of experience when it comes to weather. So that part of it, we're not replacing, our meteorologist. The only meteorologist we are replacing is my business partner, Jack. And I called him up and said, hey, man, we're replacing you with AI. And he was just like, I knew the day would come, joking around with it. Um, but we do climatology reports, which are historical weather reports. And Jack does these by hand. We charge for his hours to write these by hand. It involves hours and hours of research, his interpretations, and him thinking about the details that are going into the party. Part of that, the hours and hours of research, we can streamline so that it's easier for him to get the information to then do his interpretations. The other part of that is once we have that, there's enough of his documentation and papers and written work that he's able to then uh, teach an AI how he would approach situations. So instead of replacing all meteorologists with AI, we're simply going after one meteorologist and replacing Jack with AI, but teaching over the course of years what Jack sees and focuses on and what those relate to or how those relate to our clients and their needs, because Jack has seen and been through all this with all of our clients and knows what their concerns are and knows what questions they're going to ask. So we're now working with a group to do that. Um, for us, finding the right vendors was a big thing. I'm not a technical founder. Jack is not a technical founder. Um, Thankfully, one of our early partners in this is and does run a digital agency. So his team is and super excited to get, to work on this, because his team has seen us grow and was like, yeah, that what you're doing makes sense. We want to be a part of this. This is what it's going to cost. This is how much it will take and the time. Um, so it was really easy, but we also ran into it, and this is something that I will warn the younger crowd out there. We Before going to them, we tried finding 2 other sources. Um, and the other sources we found were young enough that they didn't understand sort of like the millennial, which business flow, which is like RFP, a bid, a negotiation. You padded your budget. I didn't pad or you padded your budget. I didn't pay for things in the upfront. I know that you're going to pad it. I'm okay with you ripping me off a little bit because that's part of the game. Like all the things that I learned from my bosses doing events for years, like the younger generation does not necessarily know all that. They just know how to code really well. Um, so that comes down to, okay, well, if that's the issue, the solution for that is you have to be so specific about what your scope is, because they are going to do exactly and program to what your scope is. So don't leave any room for interpretation. Wireframe it out yourself, even if it's on a napkin, and then find that and then build basically like the version, which you can do with a lot of these vibe code and no code things. Build a version of it. The night before I met with our programmer, I spent about 6 hours, and I'd say 2 hours of that was on TikTok learning how to vibe code, because that seemed like a good place to learn. And I built a very, very, very basic flow from onboarding to report to what should be delivered to the client. At the same time, when I showed up to the meeting the next day, the programmer also, he probably only spent about like 45 minutes, basically built out the exact same thing I had built out, but had a couple cool other features in it. And I felt like this moment of just like, cool. Before I even had to show him this, he already knew what I wanted to build. And he already had a vision for it that I was more impressed with, or anything would have been more impressive than what I did, but I was impressed with what he built. And that was like that feeling the same with like working with Alex and, the voodoo side, where I'm like, this person gets what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to let them run with it. Um, so yeah, definitely just be aware of who you're working with. There's 1,000 versions of agencies and people online that probably do great work. Then there's like 10,000 people that probably do really, mediocre work. And then there's probably 50,000 people who do absolutely no work, but are going to tell you that they can do anything in the world for you. So like, find the right people, take your time with it, and understand that like once you go down that road, you're paying for it. So like, don't blow all your money too quick. Save it, because you then need to advertise it. You then need to pay for your other bills. Um, there's a very likely and strong chance that at some point you will have the largest credit card bill of your life right after you start a company. Don't worry. As time goes, you will find out that that credit card bill was actually fucking small, and you now have a bill 3 times the size of that one, and you are so much more relaxed about it that you just keep on going. And then one day you'll pay it all off and you'll feel great. And then like 2 months later, you'll have another dumb idea, and then you'll start the cycle of back up. So
Couldn't agree more. I mean, being a bootstrap founder, you're not only not paying yourself, but you're also probably investing in the business. And
yep.
that is the risk that you have to be willing to take in order to go down the path.
The, the worst advice I ever got was a founder of a clothing line, of a clothing manufacturer that does some of the most expensive clothes that are available in existence today. Started his company 25, 30 years ago on the manufacturing side, and explained to me how I grew up in the wrong time, because it was great in the 80s where you could, I guess 45 years ago. He's like, in the 80s were great. You could open multiple credit cards and no one knew about the other one. And I asked, like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, when we started, I ran up $850,000 in credit card debt. And it was awesome because none of the cards talked to each other. So Visa didn't talk to American Express and they didn't talk to Chase. It was like, and I was like, man, that is the worst advice you could ever tell someone. And, their company's doing fine. They are doing fine. They are beyond comfortable, um, and have built this one of these, multi-million dollar companies that bootstrapped it from the beginning. But like the idea that that was just part of the game back in the 80s is crazy to me. Like we ran up one credit card and I thought that was
Yeah, I
nuts.
mean, don't go running yourself into debt, but that is sometimes what it takes to get a product off the ground, and being either finding the liquidity and having the cash to do it, or getting creative and doing it in other ways, but being really thoughtful in how you spend that money and what your timeline is, time box it, make sure you're not just going after it with like an endless amount of time. But that is what it takes. Okay, a couple rapid fire questions to close us out.
Okay, first rapid fire question. What is a good rain plan?
Rain plan, the best rain plan is a plan B. So have a plan B, stick to it, know what it is ahead of time, and then be ready to pull the trigger and just activate it. And then don't think about it after you've already activated it. So if it's a tent, that's rain plan. That's the plan B. Just go for it and stop thinking about what it could have been. It's over.
When should a couple check the weather before their event? How far in advance should they check the weather before their event?
So there's two ways to look at that. You have climatology and meteorology. Climatology, you can think about it as like your personality, and meteorology is your mood. So for climatology, 2 years out, you can start looking at what we can expect the personality of this day to be like at this venue. So use that to compare multiple venues. When it comes to the actual wedding week, don't check until 7 days out. You will see apps and everything that will tell you that they have 14-day forecasts or long range forecasts. All that means is that they are injecting it with climatology data, which is old data and not current. So check 7 days out. That's your best chance.
Awesome. What is one thing that couples or brides should know about wedding planning?
Think about your risks. So if you are terrified that there is going to be drizzles, have a rain plan that starts when the drizzles are possible. If you are not worried about drizzles, you're not worried about fog, you're not worried about mists, but you are terrified of lightning, have a backup plan that is to move everyone inside when the lightning comes within 20 miles. So just think about all of the things that could happen that would be an issue, and then set a threshold. And once you pass that threshold, that's when you move forward.
Okay, last question. If you were to start a business today from scratch, what would you do first?
If I were to start a business tomorrow, I would say do the basic research first. Google what goes into starting a business. Don't necessarily write a business plan that's 50 pages long, but give like broad strokes to what you want that to be. Think about how you're going to incorporate it. Are you going to go out and seek funding? Are you going to bootstrap this? At the end of the day, if the business gets sued, are you going to be on the line for it and you want to go for an LLC? What are your personal assets that you're willing to risk for this? Take all that stuff, write it down. Then once you have the idea and you start telling your friends, you need to tell them what you're doing, because then there's no turning back. When they tell you that it's a dumb fucking idea, don't get upset with them. Don't try to change their mind. We live in a world where you constantly see people trying to change everyone else's minds on their personal beliefs every day on the internet. It doesn't work. Just go do it. They will see the proof when it comes to fruition and when everything works out, and then they're going to feel like an idiot. Uh, and surround yourself with the right people. Don't surround yourself with people that you think are going to do the work for you. You will never find a vendor or someone on like a Fiverr or any of these like programs that offer you the quick fix to build your website that are going to be the first person, right time was the person that you wanted to hire. Find a way for yourself to build out as much of it as you can, so that your interpretation or their interpretation is as accurate as can be, and then present it to someone who can then build it out for you, knowing that you might need to redo it 3 or 4 more times till it's exactly what you want. But don't get your hopes up thinking that you're going to find a freelancer that's going to fix all your problems, or you're going to find an investor that will fix all your problems, or you're going to find a miracle client that will fix all your problems, because no matter what, you will always have fucking problems. And you just need to like accept that. Like that's the gig. The gig is being a person that has the emotional bandwidth to just live with a bunch of problems. And then one day you retire and that's it. Like until then,
It's
you're gonna have
great
problems.
advice. You're going to have to navigate the problems and get through them. Great, great advice. Andrew, it was such a pleasure having you on the pod. Thank you so much for coming on. This was
Thank
such a
you.
great conversation, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This was really, really fun.